something about wedding that makes people believe in perfection. The idea that for one day everything will fall into place. The setting will be beautiful, the couple will be in love, and all the people gathered will be there to celebrate something pure. But the guest list quietly asks a different question. What happens when you gather people who share history but not necessarily honest? The story takes place on a remote island off the coast of Ireland. It's the kind of place that feels almost cinematic, rugged cliff, crashing waves, and a sense of isolation that is both beautiful and unsettling. It's also the kind of place where once you arrive, you're not really leaving until everything is over, and that becomes important. The wedding is between Jules and Will. On the surface, they're exactly the kind of couple you would expect for a setting like this. Jules is accomplished, controlled, and very aware of how things work. She built a life that reflects effort and precision. Will, on the other hand, is effortlessly charming. He is successful and carries that kind of warmth that draws people in quickly. Together they make sense, at least from the outside. But this book isn't really interested in the outside. Instead, it slowly shifts your attention inward toward the small tensions, the quiet observation, the things people don't say out loud. And it does this through multiple perspectives. One of the most noticeable voices is Olivia, Jules' youngest sister. There is a fragility to her from the beginning. She's anxious, withdrawn, and often seems like she's bracing herself for something. At first, it's not entirely clear why. But as the story unfolds, it becomes evident that her presence at the wedding is not just about celebration. She is carrying something heavy, and being here around these people is forcing her to confront it. Then there's Jono, the best man. His relationship with Will feels strained in a way that goes beyond simple disagreement. There's a history between them, shared experiences that aren't entirely fond. And through his perspective, we begin to understand the kind of environment they grew up in. A competitive, often cruel social circle where vulnerability wasn't just discouraged, it was punished. Hannah is another perspective that stands out. She's slightly removed from the core group, attending as a guest through her husband. Because of that distance, she noticed things others might ignore. Small inconsistency, uncomfortable silence, moments where something feels off. Her role in the story is subtle but important. She represents the outsider clarity, the ability to see what others have normalized. What's interesting about Guest List is how it builds tension without rushing. There's no immediate shock. Instead, the story layers discomfort. A comment that lingers a little too long, a memory that doesn't quite sit right, a reaction that feels disappropriate, and slowly you begin to realize that this wedding is bringing together people who are connected by more than just friendship. They're connected by shared secrets. The setting plays a big role in this. The island begins as something romantic, but as the weather turns, it becomes isolating. The wind grows stronger, the sea becomes rougher, and eventually the power goes out. The shift is subtle but effective because it mirrors what's happening between the characters. What once felt controlled and curated begins to unravel. As the story progresses, more of the past comes into focus. We learn about dynamics within Will's old group of friends. What might have once been dismissed as typical school behavior begins to take on a darker tone. There are hints of cruelty that went too far, of moments that weren't just jokes but something more damaging. And importantly, there is a sense that not everyone walked away from those experiences unaffected. Olivia's story in particular begins with increasingly difficult to sit with. Her anxiety isn't random, it's rooted in something very real, and the way the narrative reveals her experience is quiet but deeply impactful. Just a gradual understanding of what she's been carrying and how the people around her responded or didn't. Jules, meanwhile, began to feel the pressure of maintaining the image she created. Her wedding isn't just a personal milestone, it's a reflection of who she believes she is. And as things start to go wrong, there's a sense that she's losing control of more than just the event. She's losing control of the narrative she built around her life. Will remain for much of the story composed, but that composure start to feel less reassuring over time. The more we learn, the more it becomes clear that charm can sometimes act as a shield, a way to deflect, to avoid scrutiny, to shape how others perceive you. And then, eventually, something happens. There's a moment, sudden disruptive, that breaks the rhythm of the wedding, a death. What the book does particularly well here is resist immediate answers. Instead of focusing on the event itself, it circles back. It asks you to reconsider everything you just read. Every interaction, every memory, every quiet tension. Because by this point, it's clear that this wasn't an isolated incident. It was a result of accumulation, of things left unresolved, of harm that was never acknowledged. When the truth is finally revealed, it doesn't feel like a twist for the sake of surprise. It feels like a conclusion, something that in hindsight had been building all along. And that's what makes the guest list effective. It's not just a mystery about who died, it's a story about people, about the version of themselves they present and the parts they choose to hide. It also explores the idea that environment can shape behavior in lasting ways, that the dynamics we experience early on, especially in close, insular groups, can influence how we treat others and how we justify those actions. But perhaps the most striking element is its quiet commentary on silence, on the things people choose not to say, on the way harm can persist not just through action but through inaction. By the end, the wedding, which was meant to symbolize unity, becomes something else entirely, a space where truth surfaces, but carefully constructed identities begin to fall apart. And the island, which once felt like an escape, becomes a place of confrontation, a place where the past can no longer be ignored. The guest list doesn't rely on constant intensity. Instead, it trusts the reader to sit with discomfort, to notice the details, to piece things together slowly. And in doing so, it creates a story that feels less like a spectacle and more like an observation of people, of memory, and of the quiet ways in which consequences eventually find their way back. It's a kind of book that lingers a little, not because of what happens, but because of what it reveals.